For the past year, I've been working on a small 3D platformer. Here are some things I'd like to share. I originally wanted to make a small little project that I would release within a few months, just so I can get some feedback on a player controller that I've been working on. The first few devlogs were about getting the 3 C's right, the character, controller, and camera, which even to this day is still something I'm trying to perfect. I wanted to make sure I got these things right, because I would hate for players to complain about these things when they are crucial to a 3D platformer. After I felt comfortable with the character, controller, and camera, I had to take the next step. I put out a public demo that anybody can try and leave feedback on. It was pretty well received and got over 2,000 downloads, which for me felt amazing. I got a lot of positive comments about people that they were enjoying it and they were hoping to see more and they saw a lot of potential. However, looking back on the demo, I realized how terrible it actually was. In the demo, the player was slow, heavy, clunky, and just felt god-awful to use. I of course took the time to completely redo my character controller from scratch and make it the best I possibly could. I had to look at other 3D platformers to see what they felt like to get a good idea of what makes a good controller. I looked at Mario Odyssey, Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, Psychonauts 2, A Hat in Time, and countless others. After writing down some things that I took notice of, I started to redo the character controller. I can say now that the current build that I have has greatly improved since the first controller that I made. Now of course my controller isn't perfect, I am a one-man team, but I can say that I'm pretty happy with it. I made sure that I sent out builds to friends regularly and other developers to ask how it felt, and overall the response was very positive, which made me feel great. However, there were more things to improve upon, which I was more than okay with addressing and fixing. Most of the feedback was on how the player felt slow, a little clunky, or just some bugs that the players encountered. So with that said, after I put out the demo, I realized that there was something missing for my project, a main mechanic. A mechanic is something that makes your game stand out from the others, like the Flood from Mario Sunshine, Cappy from Mario Odyssey, and the Psi Powers from Psychonauts. On the outside, my project just looked like a basic 3D platformer and that was it, so I was missing that grab or main mechanic. So I spent time coming up with cool gameplay ideas that could change and spice up the gameplay. I came up with a few ideas, but there was one that stuck in my mind, which was a newspaper launcher. This made complete sense, because since Goobi is a mailman, I thought it'd be cool for him to shoot newspapers, but not in the conventional sense of me literally giving Goobi a gun. So now that the idea was in place, I had to think of ways that could add to the gameplay. Mainly my idea was that things in the world would be interactable with the newspaper launcher. For example, having shootable wood crates, spawning platforms, and a lot more. However, I got a lot of comments saying that the idea seems fun, but people were saying that the way I implemented it seemed a little clunky. This made me extremely concerned and maybe go back to the drawing board and try to figure out how I was going to do this. Originally the way it worked was the player would hold down the right trigger and release it to fire. This seemed like a good idea at the time, but looking back, this seemed incredibly clunky, which everybody was right about. My second attempt to fix this problem was have the left trigger aim and the right trigger to fire. However, that completely meant I had to remap the dive button, which was on the left trigger, to the B button, which just felt wrong. People were saying that this was a better fit because most people know how to aim and shoot due to other games that they've played. However, some still were conflicted because of this because it might interrupt the flow of gameplay. So there I was stuck again. I was even considering dropping the mechanic completely because my execution seemed terrible. But then an idea struck me. People were saying that the aiming was too clunky, not the shooting. So what if I completely removed the aiming and just made the player shoot the closest object to the camera that the player was facing? This way, it doesn't require the player to stop and shoot if they need to aim, but instead just shoot the closest object that it was locked onto. I played around with this mechanic and it worked so much better than the others that I had. And this is actually the system that I'm using now, which I'm very happy with and I'm very excited for you guys to try out. I had a lot of people playtest the new version of the mechanic, and so far people who playtested it said it was the best version that I had. After fixing up the main mechanic, I went through a few redesigns of Goobi because I wasn't happy with the way the model looked. From my perspective, the model originally looked too cubish, the second model didn't really look like a robot and wasn't optimized. The third model had the right colors but looked completely lifeless. And that now brings me to the current model. The current model that I'm using is optimized and has a lot of personality compared to the rest of the models that I had, and I think this is the best he's ever looked. So I ended up with 4 different redesigns for Goobi, and I think I settled on the right one. I'm extremely happy with the design that I came up with because I think it's everything I want Goobi to be in a character. After finalizing Goobi's look, I then went on to tackling enemy AI, and all I have to say is, it's hard. Making just normal AI is difficult, so I'm going to need to spend a lot more time to make this feel right. But I did have some ideas for enemies and how they could react to the world around them, so it was a starting point. I spent countless hours researching how Unreal handles AI in games, and my first attempt, to be honest, was pretty pathetic. The AI was more moronic than me, which isn't saying much, but it was still terrible. So I scrapped the idea of just using blueprints to make AI, and I would rather use behavior trees. This seemed extremely complicated, and I honestly felt a little overwhelmed. But with a little research and countless hours of watching videos and looking on forums, I can confidently say that my AI works. Not well, but it's a starting point. It still needs improving and polishing, no doubt about it, but at least that the building blocks are there for me to use in the future. And that concluded Devlog 6. And that brings us to the present day, 1 year later. So what are my plans moving forward? Well, before I get into that, there is some very valuable things that I've learned throughout the entire year of development that I don't think many indie developers talk about. And that's one single word: scope. I'm sure like many other developers like myself, that word makes your stomach drop. I've learned over the year that I'm only one person working on the game, with the exception that I do have some friends helping out with animations, concept art, or just friends helping out with the code, which you know who you are, of course. But scope can be a very scary thing, and I originally wanted this project to be small, but then I started saying to myself, what if I had this, and what if I had that? I had to catch myself and remind myself that this is supposed to be a small project, to test my game development skills and get feedback on how I'm doing. So here's the plan. My plan is to hopefully make 2 or 3 worlds that are fully explorable and dense with things to do. As far as playtime is concerned, I'm not 100% sure, but I know that I want 2 or 3 worlds that are dense and that you guys can have fun in. So I'm sure that you guys do want more worlds and more to explore, but I don't want to overpromise or mislead anybody. I would rather have a small, short, fun game rather than a bloated, overscoped mess. And now I can actually say that I'm pretty happy and okay with turning down some ideas that I had in order to finish the project. I found it to be essential that there needs to be a balance between creativity and realism, and I think right now I've hit a pretty good median. And I'm sure you do have a lot of questions, and I feel like I can answer some of them right now, so let's answer them. How long is the game going to be? Well, since I am keeping scope in mind, I'm actually not sure. I have a few levels planned out like I said before, and there are things to do in them, but I'd rather Goobi be a short and fun experience rather than a long drag to play through. Are the levels going to be open or linear? So the levels that I have planned now are more open-ended to encourage exploring the levels. However, there is a main path that the player can follow to progress to the level, but I really am emphasizing exploring the worlds. Are there going to be bosses? I'd love to add bosses. They're extremely fun. Right now, I haven't have anything in yet, but I would love to add 1 or 2. Is there going to be a story? There actually is. Don't expect anything like Shakespeare, but the one I've written up I feel like serves the gameplay. When is the game going to come out? This is probably the question that I've been dreading the most, and the short answer is, I don't know. The longer answer is, I don't know. The project isn't extremely big, and it's rather a short and sweet experience, but who knows, developing can be rough. So that's it for all the questions that I kept seeing, and I hope the answers helped. For those who watched the entire video, I want to thank you all for the support that I've gotten. It's insane the amount of positive comments and encouragement I've gotten about Goobi for the past year, so truly thank you. For that, I've put up Demo V2 on my itch page for you all to try out right now. It's very important for me to mention that the demo is strictly just to test out the movement and the main mechanic. This isn't what the final game will look like, of course, but this just gives me a better idea of what you guys think of the movement that I've made. Make sure to leave comments on my itch page of things you liked and things I think I should improve upon. If the things you didn't like, also tell me. I'll try to update the demo if it's needed, but that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I really hope you enjoyed Demo V2 and the future devlogs to come. Thanks, and stay safe.